So you're a first-time GM. Awesome. Let's talk about the things that I wish I knew when I was in your position all those years ago. Let's get started. So, you decided that you want to run a game. That's really great news. So maybe you got the D&D starter set, maybe you found a game that you wanted to play online, maybe you've watched some stuff from like Critical Role, maybe you've heard people talk about gaming in all of your different friend circles. Either way, right now you're in the position to start running your own games, and that's a great position to be in. I remember back when I was in that spot, probably, gosh, I'm not even gonna tell you how long ago it was, but it was a while. I wanna tell you some things that I've picked up over the years that I have found to be very helpful. I also talk to a lot of people who wanna start running their own games, and they ask me, what do I need to know? And I wanna tell you those things right now. One quick thing. I use the word storyteller a lot as opposed to the word DM or GM. These are all the same things. DM is Dungeon Master, that's Dungeons & Dragons specific. Storyteller, that's kind of a World of Darkness specific thing. And GM is kind of a catch-all for other things. But the point is, they're all the same thing. So storyteller, GM, DM, they're all the same. I use the word storyteller just because it's the one that's the most comfortable for me. Let's keep going. So the first thing, where is it? I don't have it. Hang on, somewhere? No? Yes? Notepad. Always make sure you have one. Notepads are really, really important for a lot of different reasons, especially whenever you're running a game in person or online. Either way, having a place to keep your notes is so important. Let me explain. Rules. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to go through and transcribe any of the rules out of the book or anything like that. No. I like to keep a notepad handy in case there's ever a disagreement about a rule or I don't understand something about a rule as a player or a storyteller, so I write that down, like if it's a reference to a spell or if it's a reference to a combat maneuver. I like to write a note down so that after the game is done, I can go back and take a look at the core book or the other book that it might be listed in and give myself a chance to refamiliarize myself out of the game. That way I can actually be more prepared next time. Some people also use their notebooks for keeping a list of player names. I don't do that because coming up with player names isn't something that I really have a problem with. That's not me saying like, oh, I don't have a problem with it. No, that's just saying that I don't. But other people do, and that's okay. And what other people do is they usually keep a list of names for different NPCs. Sometimes it's a list of men's names, women's names, and then non-gender specific names that can be used for other things or characters. So if that works for you, or if you think that that might be helpful for you, consider using your notebook for doing that. Just have a list of about 10 to 12 names in each category. That way, if your players come up to you and they're like, hey, what's the shopkeeper's name? What's your name, shopkeep? And you're like, I have a name and it's a good one. That's not what you need to do. That way you just bust out to your notebook and it's all ready to go right there. Notebooks can also be handy for keeping track of things like flavor text that you might want to have prepared. If you've got a villain with like a really big monologue that you want to recite for your players, that's a great place to keep it. The other thing that's also very helpful, you've heard me talk in other videos in the past about having an evil plan for your villain. If you want to keep some notes about what your villain's going to try to accomplish during this session, that's a great place for it to go. Get to know your players. Because in most cases, at least in my experience, I was playing games with people that I had already known. But as I've gone through my life, I've started to play more and more games with people that I'm not as familiar with as my best friends from high school or middle school or elementary school or college. I've started to play more games with people that come to me with the express purpose of just knowing me as a storyteller. So I find it's very helpful for me to start to get to know my players. Now, this doesn't require anything other than just talking to them, finding out what they like, finding out why they want to play, finding out what their favorite color is, whatever you want to do in order to get to know the people that are going to be sitting down at your table. It's important because the more you know your players, the better you're going to be able to tell stories that they enjoy. Another reason to do this is to find out if there's something in the game that they really want to do, or maybe something that they really don't want to do. If they've had a bad experience in a past game, if they've had a great experience in a past game. All of these different things are really helpful to you as a storyteller, at least they're helpful to me. And I think that if I was a storyteller starting out now, that's one of the most important things that I like to keep in mind. If I know my players, or if I try to get on the same page as them by trying to learn about their likes and dislikes, it just makes me feel more confident because I know what my players are looking for. Familiarization is better than memorization. Let me say that one more time. Familiarization is better than memorization. And the reason I say that is because nobody memorizes the entire book. Nobody. Nobody. And if they do, if they're that rare, wonderful person who can literally have a photographic memory of every single page of every single core rule book, then I promise you, they haven't memorized the books that haven't been released yet. It doesn't matter if you memorize the rule book, because you probably won't. And familiarizing yourself and becoming comfortable with certain rules is really important. You don't need to memorize the rule book. And in fact, come here, I want to tell you a secret. Like, come here. You don't even have to read the whole rule book. You don't have to. There's really only a couple of things that, depending on what system you're playing in, you should really familiarize yourself with and spend your energy on trying to actually understand the best of your ability. 3 things: character creation, combat rules, and role-playing rules. Understanding those 3 basic fundamentals very well make you a much better equipped person to be ready to run a story than if you spent the entire time trying to memorize every single spell. When you're just starting out, I would say focus your attention on those 3 areas. And yeah, I know there's probably a lot of people that are shouting at their computer screens right now, "You need to read the whole book!" No, you don't. You really, really don't. All you need to do is focus on those 3 areas, because later, after you've run your first session, you're gonna go back and refamiliarize yourself with the book anyway, because eventually you will have read the whole book. But before you run your first game, it's not essential. You don't need to read the whole thing before you sit down to run a game. But it's very intimidating because there's a lot of reading, or at least there looks like there's a lot of reading. And a lot of different manufacturers, I'm looking at you, Wizards of the Coast, split it up into a bunch of different books. They don't do that because everything needs to be in its own book. They do that so they can take your money. But at the same time, you don't have to read the Dungeon Master's Guide to be a Dungeon Master. It's probably something that people don't agree with, but whatever. You don't need to read it all right away, because you're going to end up reading it more if you enjoy the process of storytelling. And I don't see any reason to wind yourself up because you feel like you have to memorize this entire phone book worth of material. And you can't. It's an unrealistic expectation. Read the things that will help you become a storyteller, and those things are those 3 principles that I already mentioned earlier. Be really good at those fundamentals, and then everything else is going to fall into place, because eventually you're going to read the rest of it anyway. Let's talk about mistakes, because they're unavoidable. Mistakes will happen, but that's okay. Mistakes are actually great. I think that mistakes are very helpful, because without mistakes, it's kind of hard to grow as a storyteller. There's this saying that I heard, it gets used by teachers sometimes, and I really love it. It's that OOPS is an acronym. OOPS stands for Other Opportunities for Success. Now, I know that kind of makes it sound like oops, but whatever. Mistakes are going to happen, and how you learn from those mistakes are going to dictate how you improve as a storyteller. Because if I look back on my past and look at all the games that I've run, I know that I do a better job now than I did however many years ago that I started. And the same thing's going to apply for you as a new storyteller. Yes, mistakes are going to happen, and yeah, you might feel embarrassed at the time, and that's natural, that's fine. It's okay to feel embarrassed. But what matters most about those mistakes is how you recover from them. If you make a mistake, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It just means that you have the opportunity to do it better the next time, because there's going to be a next time. And not running a game, or at least pumping your brakes because you feel like you're going to make a mistake, can really kind of stifle creativity, I've found. So in most cases, I feel like if you got a rule wrong, oh well, it's not the end of the world, because it's a fantasy world, and guess what? It's gonna keep turning because you say it does. If you make a mistake, it's okay. Forgive yourself. And if your players make a mistake, forgive them too, because the whole point is not to get the rules right every time, it's to enjoy the story. And that's why making mistakes is okay. I wanna be a storyteller, I wanna be a DM. How do I become a DM? Well, the answer is very simple. You start. All you do is sit down and be like, hey, you guys wanna play D&D? Congratulations, you're a DM. It's really not much harder than that. But I see a lot of people get hung up on the fact that they feel like they're not prepared enough in the worlds that they're creating, in the NPCs that they're building, in the plot that they're developing, in the villains that they want to create. They feel like that has to be up to a certain expectation before they can run the game. If you want to spend time developing all of those things, that's great. I'm excited for you. That's important. But the thing to remember is that at a certain point, you have to play the game. So however much preparation you put into it is however much you want to put into it. I'm not going to say don't prep. If you want to prep your games, that's up to you. But at the same time, you shouldn't spend so much time trying to make everything perfect, because it's almost like an inverse correlation. In my opinion, the more time spent preparing is the less likelihood that you're going to actually get a chance to play anything. Helmut von Moltke said that no plan survives contact with the enemy, and that's a crazy name. But at the same time, it's important to remember your players are not the enemy, but the idea still stands. Any plan that you make, your players will immediately do something that you did not expect. The thing that's important to remember about preparation is that you should be prepared to be unprepared. As long as you are comfortable with the idea that at some point during that game, you're probably not going to know what happens next, you won't be as surprised when it happens. And part of that means that if you spend all of this exhaustive time preparing everything that you want your players to do, it's not that you're going to be disappointed, it's that it's probably not going to happen the way you expect it. A lot of storytellers that I've met, or a lot of potential GMs that I've met, have really found that first game stumbling block to be something that's really hard to get over, because they don't feel like they have everything all sorted and in place before they actually sit down to run that first game. And I implore you, you have everything that it takes to run your first game. And if you feel like you don't have enough ready, there are resources out there to help you run your first game if you feel like all of that preparation is going to be a big stumbling block for you. Pick up a pre-prepared adventure module, go find one online from a lot of great independent game developers, because it's important. That first game is really a big make or break moment. Now, that's not to say that if it goes badly, you're never gonna run again. And, well, actually, I take that back. If it goes badly and it's gone badly enough for some people that I know, it can be really hard to get back on the horse. But I'm getting off topic. Running that first game is important because it can prove to you, you get to prove to yourself that everything that you need to do to run the game actually isn't as complex as you think, and you don't need to put all of the preparation in that you might feel like you need to. Run that first game, and then you're going to know what you need to prepare for the next game, because you will have found all of the gaps in your preparation by playing instead of by preparing. You need to take care of yourself. Being a GM means that you are a player too. You're playing more characters than the regular main characters, but you are still a vital and essential part of that game. And it's important not to lose sight of that, because I've been burned out as a GM, and I've seen my friends get burned out as GMs, and I've met people who've gotten burned out as GMs because they feel like that there's this huge burden on them to keep telling the story no matter the cost. And yes, your friends may have a great time playing even if you're burned out, but at the same time, you're burned out. Unless you take the time to take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to tell good stories. You've got to be able to give of yourself when you're a GM. And if you've given everything up that you have and you don't have anything left to give, then you're going to end up hurting yourself emotionally, mentally. If you need to take a step back and take care of yourself, recover, maybe play a few sessions as opposed to running everything, then that's okay. You need to know where those boundaries lie, and you need to be upfront about them with your players. That can be an expectation, and it, in my opinion, is an important expectation to have when you go into your first game. When you do this for the first time, it does not mean that this is the only thing that you will ever do again as a storyteller. And I say that knowing full well that the hashtag #ForeverDM is a real thing. If you feel like you're only going to be a DM in the future, that's not true. You will be able to play again and not just be the DM for the rest of your life. Thank you so much for watching. That's all I've got for you today. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this, especially if you're a new GM. If you're watching this before you take the plunge into running your first game, thank you. I'm flattered. Really, I'm not being hyperbolic about that. I'm actually very flattered. I wish you luck, because it's going to be fun and it's going to be okay. And I know it can feel overwhelming, but I promise you, it's a lifelong hobby that's actually really good for a lot of reasons. And if I'm the first one to say it, welcome to the hobby of role-playing games. Thank you so much for being here, because we're glad you are. If you agree with these tips, or you don't agree with them, or you want to add something, leave them in the comments section below, or follow me on Instagram or Twitter. I really want to know what some other tips are from veteran GMs that they might have for new GMs going out there into the field. You can do this. Lots of people have started running games before, lots of people have become new storytellers, lots of people have become new DMs, GMs, and whatever. And there is a song lyric from one of Talib Kweli's albums that I absolutely love, and it goes, "If you can walk, you can dance, and if you can talk, you can sing." He attributes that line to a proverb from Zimbabwe. I want to add one thing to that. If you can listen, you can tell a story. That's the only qualifier it takes. Because if you've heard a story that you like and you want to tell your own story, you have what it takes to become a good game master. Even if you've never done it before, even if you haven't read a rule book yet, I want to tell you that you have all of the qualifications you need to start telling stories. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourself, be kind, and have fun adventuring.